Welcome to the Trial Lawyers Injury Podcast with David Zagoria.
Welcome to the Trial Lawyers Injury Podcast with David Zagoria. Trial lawyer David Zagoria is of Zagoria Neely Injury Attorneys. David is a former prosecutor who now represents injury victims across Georgia in serious cases involving dog attacks, car wrecks, premises liability, and wrongful death claims. Known for his courtroom experience and strategic approach to litigation, David helps clients understand how injury cases are investigated, how they're proven, negotiated, and tried. I'm Shameika Rhymes, and today we're talking about what happens in a dog bite case in Georgia from start to finish. Welcome, David.
Hey, Shameika. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm excited to get into this. So, dog bite cases are handled very differently than many other injury claims in Georgia. So, what makes these cases more complicated than people expect?
That's right, Shameika. So dog bite cases in Georgia are governed by OCGA 5127. And OCGA 5127 provides a lot of protection for dog owners in Georgia. And there's really three ways we can prove liability in a dog bite case. And that's what makes them so different than your typical case, like, let's say, a car wreck or a slip and fall. In Georgia, we've got to have either the dog owner was aware their dog was out, meaning there's a leash law violation, and at the time, the dog owner was aware that their dog was out loose and unrestrained. The second way we can prove liability in Georgia is that the dog has a history of aggression towards people. And again, the dog owner has to know about that. So aggression towards squirrels or chasing cats, that doesn't count. It has to be a prior act of aggression, meaning a bite, chasing, or an attempt to bite a human being. Now, there is a third way that liability can happen in Georgia, and that is the negligent performance of an assumed duty, meaning, Shameika, I invite you over to my house. I tell you I have a dog, and you say, David, I'm afraid of dogs. Do you mind putting your dog up? And I say, sure, Shameika, I'm happy to put my dog up. You come over to my house and I say, Shameika, you know what? I think you're really going to love my dog, Peaches. Let me let her out. I want you to meet her. And I let Peaches out and she bites you. I have agreed to perform the duty of keeping my dog up. I have violated that duty. Now I'm liable. The other area that is very technical and probably the most difficult is when we're looking at a multi-tenant situation, like an apartment complex, townhomes, condominiums, where there's multiple tenants and a governing body over, say like a management company, an HOA, something like that. And we're trying to get after them because the dog owner has either inadequate coverage, meaning our injuries far exceed the amount of insurance the dog owner has, or more commonly, especially in the world of apartments, there's no insurance at all. So what do? We look to the apartment complex, but the only way we can prove liability on the part of the apartment complex is it's a two-factor test. One is the bite or attack has to occur on common grounds of the apartment complex, meaning, Shameika, if you invited me over to your apartment to watch a Braves game tonight, and I'm inside your apartment and your dog bites me, that's not a common area. That's inside your apartment. It's private. And the management company has no control over what happens inside your apartment. So there's no liability there. A common area would be parking lots, tennis courts, pools. So we have to have the attack in a common area. That's an area that the owner management company controls, and they have to be aware of the hazard. What's the hazard we're talking about? We're talking about an aggressive dog. So typically the dog has chased, tried to bite, or bitten, and someone's complained to the owner. So now they know there's a hazard on the property. The attack occurs in a common area. The apartment complex can then be liable for our client's injuries. So they're very favorable laws, and they're not favorable to the victims of these attacks. They're favorable to dog owners and multi-tenant apartment complexes, condominiums, anything governed by an HOA.
Okay. I was thinking, wow, how did you know I was afraid of dogs? Because I have been bitten by a dog. When someone says, oh, my dog doesn't bite,
I know. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. And people say that all the time and they want you to pet their dog. They want you
Mhm.
to like their dog. And I get it. I'm a dog owner too. I love my dog and I like to share the joy I have with my dog with other people, but dogs are not for everybody. And a lot of people, unfortunately, have had a bad experience in their life. And it's one of the really the one of the most important things we do in a dog bite case, especially with children. And it's really why I got into this area and have really concentrated on becoming a specialist and being the best that can be in representing victims of dog bites is the unconditional love that people get from their dogs when they come home from work. Doesn't matter how bad your day's been, the dog's going to run up to you, wag its tail, and is happy to see you. And that kind of unconditional love is priceless. And Shameika, what you just told me breaks my heart because when people have gone through an experience where they've been bitten, children, adults, it can
Mhm.
cause people to be afraid of dogs and they're deprived of that unconditional love
Yeah.
that is so amazing that we get from our dogs. So I'm so sorry that happened to you and I'm sorry that that's been taken from you.
Thank you. Well, what are the first decisions that can affect the direction or value of a dog bite case after the attack happens?
Well, the first thing we have to figure out is who is liable for the dog bite attack. And when I say attack, that could mean a knockdown or it could mean a bite, because sometimes dogs will run up and jump on people and someone will get knocked down and they may break bones. We see that a lot, unfortunately, with the elderly. When a dog runs up and jumps on them and they fall down, they tend to get injured a lot worse than young folks. So we have to determine who the defendant is. And in many cases, for example, the apartment complex case, the renter's not going to have coverage. So we have to shift our focus on who's responsible because we can't get anything from the renter. The next thing we're going to have to determine if it's just an individual who's living in a single family home is is there insurance that's going to cover this? Because a lot of times people will rent homes and they will have no renter's insurance. Landlords in a single family home are not responsible for what happens on that property, even if they know of the hazard meaning a biting dog. So the renter has to have renter's coverage. And we get this so often with folks. They say, okay, the renter doesn't have coverage. Let's sue the landlord. We can't. It'll get thrown out in court in something called a motion for summary judgment. And the case will never even get to a jury. And that is such a hard conversation to have with clients. So we have to find out who the proper defendant is, and then we have to determine if there's insurance. And the next thing that we have to do is we have to start fleshing out liability. Now, the most complicated situation with liability is if the bite occurs when the dog is restrained. If that happens, we have to kick our investigation into overdrive and we have to find evidence of a prior aggressive act. And when I say the dog is restrained, what does that mean? Restrained means on a leash. It means in the backyard in a properly um, sized fence that's been maintained, doesn't have holes in it. It means inside the house. It means inside a car with the windows rolled up enough to where the dog can't get out, or in the bed of a pickup, chained to the bed of the pickup. Those are all examples of restraint, proper restraint of a dog. Maybe not so much in the back of a pickup, but in Georgia, we see that probably a lot more than you may see up in New York. Once we determine that this is the type of case it is, we have to find a prior witness. And that's when our investigation kicks into overdrive. If it is a case where the dog is out running loose, unrestrained, we have to research the county to find out if there is actually a leash law. Believe it or not, there are over 30 counties in Georgia that have no restraint law, meaning your dog can run loose and that's not a problem. It's not a violation of law. And in those counties, we have to treat that as if the dog was restrained, meaning we're going to have to find a prior act of aggression towards a human being in order to prove liability. I hope that answers your question. That was probably more than
It
you,
does.
you asked.
It does. It does. And I'm curious, how quickly does evidence start disappearing in a dog bite case, and what evidence matters the most early on?
There's really two pieces of evidence that are key. And I would say it's the first 30 days. After 30 days, we're going to have a problem. And the first piece of evidence is video evidence. We have broken many cases wide open by getting in touch with neighbors and their Ring cameras. We've had situations where there have been attacks or bites where someone was walking on a more commercial area and a dog attacked them, and we were able to get videos from gas stations, security cameras. So video evidence is huge. And what it does, it's like, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I say a video is worth 10,000 words. To actually see someone being attacked by a dog, it's horrifying. And it increases exponentially the value of the case to actually see what happened. If there are issues such as provocation, which means that the victim did something to antagonize the dog, to make the dog bite, those types of defenses can be eviscerated if we see it on video. And the second piece of evidence that is absolutely gold in a case is eyewitness testimony. And the reason I say 30 days for that is, in my experience over the last 30 years, at the outset of a case, people want to help. When we get the animal control report, when we get police reports, and it has contact information, we get 911 calls, it has phone numbers for people who've witnessed what happened. They're really willing to help within the first 30 days. They're horrified of what's happened. They want to be involved. They want to be an aid to the victim who's been hurt. But over time, they really lose interest. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be involved. It just becomes unimportant as they move on in their lives. And that's just human nature. So we found it absolutely imperative to identify eyewitnesses and to interview them, both video and audio, and record it. We asked them for permission, and then we asked them what happened. It will do two things. One, if liability is clear, the video is going to help establish damages, meaning the horror of what happened, just how awful it was. But if there are issues with liability, let's say the dog was leashed and this witness says that dog chased me before, we've got to get a video recording. And if at all possible, we'll get a sworn affidavit. An affidavit is the statement. It's sworn to under oath. It's signed in front of a notary. And if they disappear or refuse to respond to a subpoena, the affidavit is admissible in court. And it is absolutely admissible to defeat any sort of motion to get the case thrown out, because we can't meet the standard of liability to say that there's a prior aggressive act towards a human being. So I would say the two most important things that we need to get from the outset, because it will likely disappear: witness statements, affidavits from witnesses, and video cameras. The Ring camera especially needs to be obtained within the first 30 days, because most people don't pay for storage beyond that. It's not an infinite storage period. Sometimes people do pay to have extended storage, but it's too risky to wait longer than the 30 days to get that video. Now, the gas stations, the QTs of the world, they'll have it a lot longer. So it's a little safer with them. But in the neighborhood, with just a neighborhood that got the video, you got to get it. And that means sometimes we have to go to the neighborhood and walk the neighborhood and see, are there Ring cameras in this neighborhood?
Wow, I did not know that. So what are lawyers looking for, like in the medical records, and how quickly should someone go to the doctor or the emergency room after they get bitten?
Shameika, that's a great question. So I incur, if the skin is broken, if someone is bitten by a dog and their skin is broken, go to the doctor right away. Now, I hope and pray that anyone who's bitten by a dog, the dog owner is responsible enough to turn over rabies vaccination, because rabies is very serious. It can even cause death in human beings. If it's untreated, it's bad news. So you got to go to the doctor. If the skin's broken, one of the things we all know is that dogs' mouths are filthy. They're dirty. And so even if it's just a puncture wound, go to the doctor, get the wound cleaned out, because the worst thing that can happen is it get infected. You can get terrible infections from a dog bite. So it's super important. Go to the doctor, get it treated, make sure it doesn't get infected, call animal control. on the way to the doctor, because animal control will contact the dog owner and require the dog owner to turn over the vaccination records. If you can't get the vaccination records, it's going to be a good idea to get the rabies shots, which are painful and quite expensive, but it is worth it because rabies itself is really horrible. So hopefully you get the rabies documentation from animal control, but animal control is also going to go to the dog owner and ask what happened. And there are numerous examples of how the dog owner telling their side of the story to animal control has helped us win a case. I'll give you an example. I represent a little boy who was visiting from Florida, and he was visiting a friend of his aunt's who lived next door. And in the statement to animal control, this dog owner said, yes, the little boy was in the backyard and the dog ran outside and he was unleashed at the time when he bit the little boy. We were able to establish liability with that one statement from animal control. There are counties in Georgia that are too small to have animal control. So call the police. If there's no animal control, absolutely. Whatever law enforcement is in your county, call them. They'll document the bite. There's something called the Ian Dunbar bite scale, which grades the severity of a dog bite. They will give it a severity rating under the Ian Dunbar bite scale, which is very helpful when talking to adjusters about the severity of the bite. A lot of times they will document the severity of the bite with photographs of their own. If they don't, make sure you take photographs yourself. Photographs, like we said, they're a picture's worth 1,000 words. They're maybe the most powerful evidence we can have are photos and videos of attacks and injuries. So absolutely document the injuries with photographs, call law enforcement so they do their job. The other addition of law enforcement is if there is a violation of local ordinances, leash law violation, attacks without provocation, nuisance dog, they'll issue a citation. The citation will give us leverage in the case. And what do I mean by leverage and why do we need that? One of the very difficult things in a dog bite case that differentiates it from just about everything else, you don't get insurance information. So for example, in a car wreck, what happens? The cop comes up and says, I need to see your license, registration, and your insurance. And they take your insurance information, you exchange it with the other driver, and insurance is never an issue in a car wreck case. You find out the day of the wreck. Unfortunately, that is not done in a dog bite or dog knockdown case. Animal control or police come and they will never ask, do you have insurance? I don't even think they know what insurance would cover it. It's homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance. So when we get a dog bite case and we get an animal control report or police report, there's nothing about insurance in there. So it gives me the opportunity, if there's been a ticket given, there's going to be a court date, I can call up the dog owner and ask them for the insurance information. And that conversation generally will go something like this. Hi, my name is David Zagoria. I know you feel really bad that your dog hurt my client. I don't want anything bad to happen to your dog. We're not trying to have your dog put down. As a matter of fact, I don't want that to happen, but I need your help. My client has medical bills. They're starting to climb, and your insurance policy on your home will help pay those bills. I would really appreciate it if you could help my client with that. And if you do, I'm happy to talk to the prosecutor about dropping some of the tickets because you're being so helpful. That sort of leverage has broken cases wide open. And it's a real advantage when someone's hurt that they call us right away. Because once dog bite court has come and gone, or worse, animal control doesn't issue a ticket because my client says, no, I don't want them to get a ticket. I don't want them to get in trouble. Well, that opportunity's gone. And sometimes the only way we can find insurance at that point is we have to file suit, which begins a very expensive and lengthy process that we could have avoided if we're brought in at the very beginning of the case, insist on tickets being issued, and get in touch with the dog owner. If the dog owner doesn't answer my calls, we go to dog bite court. I was just down in Fulton County Magistrate Court, spoke with a dog owner whose dog bit a child. He couldn't have felt worse. He wanted to help. He gave me a recorded statement about he knew his dog was out. He knew how he got out. He felt horrible. And because of that, I told the judge he'd been very helpful. We didn't want to see him do any jail time. And so he got a very minimum sentence, which I thought was very appropriate. And, when it was done, he met me and my client outside and apologized and gave her a hug. And it meant a lot to her, and it meant a lot to me too. It was very, very valuable to actually meet this man in court, not just for the case, but to realize what kind of person he is and to help my client with the healing process, to actually get an apology and a heartfelt apology. So that's the other bonus about going to the dog bite, or it's usually magistrate court or recorder's court.
Wow. Thank you so much, David, for breaking this down and explaining the ins and outs of a dog bite case and timeline. Thank you for coming and breaking that down for us today.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Trial Lawyers Injury Podcast with David Zagoria. If you'd like to learn more about David Zagoria and Zagoria Neely Injury Attorneys, visit lawzagoria.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who might need trusted guidance after a serious injury.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.